It's time for another edition of Lewis at Large, 60 minutes of smart talk radio featuring guests from all walks of life in conversation with your host, Warner Lewis. So sit back and lend us your ears for the next hour. Now here with today's first guest is the host of Lewis at Large, Warner Lewis.
Well, welcome everybody to another segment of Lewis at Large. Yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck, and of course that means some smart talk radio is in your future. Got an interesting segment today. We're going to be talking with Michele Payn-Knoper, and I think I've got the name right, but we'll double check it throughout. She was one of North America's leading farm and food advocates and has put together a very interesting work, a double-sided perspective called No More Food Fights. It's a productive farm and food conversation. Michele founded Ag Chat and Food Chat, virtual communities connecting thousands of agriculture and food people together. She is also the founder of, I believe, CauseMatters.com. We'll talk about that as well. It should be an interesting conversation indeed about ourselves and our food. Michele, how are you, my friend?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to having a good conversation about food, particularly with Thanksgiving coming up.
You bet. And again, it's Knoper, right?
It's actually Knoper, but
Knoper.
I answered about anything besides Michael.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Michael, it will not be. Let's do this.
Thank you.
Let's for some perspective, let's give our Lewis at Large listeners a little bit more about your background. Aryan and agrarian lifestyle is not new to you, but share, if you would, a little bit about your background and what brought you to put No More Food Fights together.
Sure. Well, I'm a farm girl since birth, have always lived in the country and loved the farm. Grew up on a dairy farm in southern Michigan. I grew up milking registered Holstein cattle, started owning my own cattle at 9, which I actually still own and breed registered Holsteins today. And I have been a part of agriculture my entire life. My career has spanned the globe in working with different agricultural organizations. I primarily work as a professional speaker and now have authored No More Food Fights, and really wrote the book because it seems as though food has become such an emotional issue, and it really doesn't have to be. Food is central to our family's well-being. I happen to believe that it should be celebrated, and I really want to encourage people to get the truth behind their plate, get to know the people behind the plate, and understand where their food comes from so that they can identify some of the marketing misinformation that's out there.
We have had guests on in the past talking about the values of organic, the values of sort of local and sustainable, and there has, quite frankly, always been a little bit of a political agenda behind that. That probably doesn't surprise you. My sense with you is growing food is in your blood. It's something that comes natural to you, and I think what you're trying to do is maybe tell everybody, chill out here just a little bit and let's just talk about it.
That is essentially what I'm trying to do. Obviously, I come from the farm side of the plate, but I look at the food plate as a 360-degree opportunity, and that includes farmers who need to listen to what food buyer concerns are as well. To me, food should be about choice, and not only choice on the plate. If you choose to eat organic and you have the reasons to do that for your family, then more power to you. But just be sure you're making the choices based upon facts and science and some standards for your family versus marketing misinformation. Likewise, I happen to believe that farmers deserve the same choice in the way that they farm, and I have consistently seen over the last 20 years that we've had more and more choices removed at the farm as to how people are allowed to produce food. So to me, this is about freedom of choice around the entire plate, whether you're on the food side or the farm side.
What do you, as you sort of watch these food debates, whether they're coming from, as you say, the farm side, the food side, the consumer side, consumer advocate side, were you finding a lot of misconceptions or misinformation? Tell us about that.
I am. I found a lot of misconceptions. You know, for many years, people thought that farmers were in bib overalls, and I happen to believe that that image still exists. And I even reference in the book that we're not talking Charlotte's Web anymore. Many times people have that imagery in the mind. In fact, farms today, modern agriculture today, is a very technologically advanced opportunity for us to appreciate. And many times people are scared by what they don't know. The reality is only 1.5% of our population is on a farm or ranch. And frankly, they have not done a great job about communicating about where food comes from. So I think when you look at the 98.5%, that's typically 3 to 4 generations removed from a farmer ranch, there's a lot of distrust. You have distrust as part of the equation, and then you have a tremendous amount of political agendas, as you had mentioned, primarily by activist groups, some by celebrities like Dr. Oz and Food Babe and others that like to, shall we say, benefit from spreading sensationalism. And it really is frustrating because when you have people who are not familiar and have that distrust on one side, and then you have misinformation, sensationalized misinformation flowing on another side, it makes for an equation that is extremely difficult for people to understand where their food comes from. And I know as a mother, when I go into the grocery store, it's frustrating and it's confusing, and that's ultimately what led me to write No More Food Fights, and why half the book is targeted at the food side. It's really to help people understand, look, food is food. It doesn't have to be complicated. It is a necessity. So let's just talk about it and understand what is important for our families and where it comes from.
Curious as to what kind of initial reaction you're getting, not only to the book, but also just to the work that you're doing. I'm curious as to who is supportive, and are you getting any pushback anywhere?
Well, there certainly is plenty of pushback. Because I've been engaged in social media for more than 5 years, I saw a lot of early emotional debates. I would offer a biotechnology or GMO as an example of one of the most contentious food issues. I was in Hawaii working, I might add, last month, and worked with some of the folks that are working on the biotech debate there. And as you may or may not know, there's been a tremendous amount of local ordinances and legislation passed that ban the growth of GMO products. And that might sound great to your listeners, but if you enjoy papaya, the papaya business was actually saved about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, because of biotechnology, because there was a particular mold or fungus that was destroying the trees. And some of the researchers over in Hawaii came up with a biotech solution to that so that the trees became resistant to what was attacking them. That's an example, too, about biotechnology that's advantageous to the consumer. We wouldn't have papaya today if it weren't for that particular technology. And now those islands, Maui and Molokai, have both banned the growth of biotechnology products. So even papaya can't be grown, and that is expected to be overturned. But that's just an example of some of the politics that have gone awry, and how, frankly, crazy people have been. I mean, I know of folks that work in biotech that have been threatened, have been attacked. It really is that crazy. I myself have not experienced that kind of pushback physically, but certainly online I get called a wide variety of terms, from paid industry hack to agriculture to crazy prostitute and those sorts of things. And at some point, you just have to let those roll off your back. I happen to believe in agriculture. I know the people that are engaged in our business care deeply about the land and animals. And if I can help convey, whether it be through this book or whether it be through online, help convey how much farmers truly care and the opportunity to be able to connect food and consumers, then I think that's a real opportunity for all of us.
Our guest on Lewis at Large is Michele Payn-Knoper. She is a farmer first, food advocate second, author third, or maybe in a different order than that. But there's a brand new work called No More No More Food Fights. Interesting 360-degree view from the farm side of things, of course, and of course the food side, consumer side. Interesting work indeed, and a very fair perspective. And trying to ratchet back a little bit the heated discussion about the things that we simply put in our mouths. Michele, I'm also wondering, in some of the research that you did for the book and in some of these discussions, have any of your base opinions changed at all?
I have to say that the opinion that I've had through, it's been nearly 14 years now of professional speaking and working primarily in the agriculture space and then moving more into the dietetic nutrition and healthcare space, that the opinion that I have held about agriculture remains true. I think that agriculture primarily does the right thing. Certainly we're not perfect. We do need to understand what the perspectives are from all around the plate. The opinion that has probably changed the most is the opportunity for agriculture to learn from the other side of the plate and the opportunity to truly stop and listen. When I wrote the food side of No More Food Fights and focused on the six senses plus common sense, it was extremely difficult for me to take off my agriculture hat because, after all, being a part of the farm is truly part of my fabric. And to take that hat off and to understand people's concerns around food is probably where my opinion changed the most. I do think that we, on the agriculture side of the plate, do need to stop and listen. And equally as much, I probably believe that the food side of the plate also needs to get a firsthand understanding of what farmers are doing out there as well.
Well, I'm curious as to when you get pushback, and you referenced this a little bit earlier, but I'm curious are you getting pushback fervently, and what form of pushback do you get? Are those just adversarial questions at a speaking engagement, or are they grumpy letters you get? What do you get?
It varies. Some are some questions, some are some comments on the blog, some are comments, emails. Used to be a tremendous amount of tweets and so forth. So the pushback varies anything from, I'm clearly in favor of modern biotechnology practices. I'm clearly in favor of modern agriculture overall. I also believe in choice. So many times organic folks may think that I'm against organic. In fact, I'm not against organic. I choose to not purchase organic for my own family because I don't think that the science supports it. However, I advocate just as much for my friend's right to farm organically as I will advocate for my friend's right to farm in modern agriculture. And so some of the pushback is related to that because of the fact that I am a dairy person and a registered Holstein breeder. I have some consternation about the claims that the Humane Society of the United States has made around animal welfare and the way that farmers care for their animals. I don't think that it's right for people in Washington, D.C., to be dictating how I care for my animals in Indiana, particularly when I'm standing there and trying to care for them to the best of my ability, and they have no clue how to do that. So I certainly get plenty of pushback on that. But really what I try to do is to help people have a non-contentious conversation. And so by taking that position, I think because of the fact that I refuse to engage in sensationalism, and that to me it doesn't have to be about a debate, it's about a discussion, it's about meeting at the center of the plate, which is why the center chapter of the book is identical on both sides, is to engage people and encourage them to truly take a look at where they can reach across the plate and shake hands.
What about, you touched on this briefly, but let's talk about the food community, food growers, and the public, frankly, their relationship with those that make the laws that govern food, its distribution, its labeling, etc. How is that relationship? How good, poor, or indifferent, or whatever, however you want to frame it, Michele, has Washington been to this whole evolution as we look at food and we start to look at it much closer?
Well, there certainly are some interesting relationships when you look at what's happening around legislation. I would cite the Farm Bill as an example, what people call the Farm Bill, and think that subsidies are being handed out to farmers and farmers are getting rich, when in fact some 86% of the, quote, Farm Bill has to do with food and nutrition programs and food welfare programs, if you will. So there certainly has been a great deal of uptake around the relationships centering on legislation and regulation. Another example that I would cite, I mentioned the Humane Society of the United States earlier. I love kittens and puppies. I support local animal shelters. The Humane Society of the United States is not about the local animal shelter. Less than 3% of their multi-million budget goes to that. And what the Humane Society has been very successful at doing is to drive legislation at a state level and to some extent at a national level that basically increases cost of animal agriculture in this country. They're on record for saying that they would like to drive animal agriculture out of North America. And so obviously pushing regulation is a part of that. That's really tough to compete against when you look at the millions of dollars that they have at their disposal. And so I would certainly assess the relationships that the food, the farm side has, and as far as relationships with legislators as being fairly positive. There's a lot of work being done on that. But unfortunately, fewer and fewer legislators have any agriculture background, just as the same with our society. So again, to me, it all goes back to firsthand perspective and being able to understand that if they get on a farm and they talk to a farmer, that they might be able to see how this legislation is impacting something that's essential to our economy.
What about as you look around? And again, the perspective is so much different. You've lived this lifestyle. What do you have any concerns at all that the family farm or that those young people are leaving the farm? At least statistically, they are. And if you've got statistics to the contrary, we would certainly like to hear them. What kind of future is that? How do we handle that in the future?
Well, that's a great question. I would say that when you look at the average age of the American farmer, it's over 58 now. And we all know that's a major issue. It's been interesting because with this particular generation, people are returning to the farm, and more so than, for example, I'm part of Generation X, and many of us did not return to the farm, and we were not encouraged to do so. I've seen a shift in that because I do see people coming back and seeing it as a viable business opportunity. I mean, the reality in agriculture is, one, it's a whole lot of work, and two, it's never going to be the glamorous seven-figure career that some people aspire to. But I think with everything that's happened with the recession, people are starting to find more attractiveness in the stability, which agriculture absolutely offers. And further, there's 200 and some careers in agriculture, so many times people don't see that the farm perhaps would be an attractive place to go back to, but there are a myriad of other careers that they can go into. And further, when you look at the skills that are needed today to farm successful today, you have to have the business, you have to have the science, and you have to have the technological skills to succeed. So it certainly is a challenge for young people that are looking for that. And I think that we'll see more and more young people going into it. One of the interesting trends that certainly has caused a lot of attention in this last year is I believe that now 25% of farm operators are female operators. And so that's been a trend that's been growing as well. The good news for all of your listeners out there is regardless of their age or their gender, the people that are out there producing the land, that are taking care of the land and producing your food and caring for animals care deeply about what they're doing. And to people in agriculture, this is our life. It's not an occupation. It's a lifestyle. And yes, it is a business, but it's something that we care deeply about.
Well, it is a subject important to all of us. If you like to eat or if you need to eat to sustain your life, food is a fairly big deal. We have been talking to one that knows, Michele Payn-Knoper, a brand new work called No More Food Fart. Gosh, I don't know why I'm stuck on that. No More Food Fights. Good Lord. Growing a productive farm and food conversation from the farm side as well as the food side. It is a very interesting work. Hey, Michele, how can people find out more? I know you have a website, but how can people get a copy of the book and kind of get a little bit more perspective here?
Well, I certainly would encourage anybody to add this to their list, and you can do so at causematters.com, amazon.com, or Barnes & Nobles also carries the book and whatnot. If you would like a signed copy, those are only available at my website, which is causematters.com, where I also write a Gateside blog. So always happy to hear people from any side of the food plate. And would encourage you to engage in the conversation and try to get the facts about where your food comes from.
Thank you so much for spending time with us, and have a great 2015.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. You have a great 2015 yourself.
You bet. We'll be back with more right after this on Lewis at Large.